welcome to the Con Guy podcast and our 45th anniversary of Jaws Shark Week celebration. This is Shark Week, and we are celebrating the best way we know how by celebrating our most favorite shark, Bruce himself from Steven Spielberg's magnificent movie from 1975, Jaws. It changed everything we know about the ocean. My name is Jim Fry. Joining me today from the couch is Luke Cheeseman. We call him Cheeseman. Hi, Cheeseman. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Excited to talk Jaws and a little Back to the Future.
All right. Yes. As we celebrate Jaws today, to help us celebrate this milestone, we are so honored to be joined by special effects designer Kevin Pike. Kevin Pike is an American film special effects supervisor, below-the-line talent agent, and he is a screenwriting consultant. As a matter of fact, we told him we were screenwriters, and the first thing Kevin asked us, do you guys know how to get your script finished? Kevin, thank you for asking that, because obviously we don't. No. Anyways, he is best known for supervising the visual effects in the 1985 film Back to the Future, and also we're talking with him today about Jaws. He and his company, FilmTrix, were primarily responsible for construction and the modification that created the film's iconic DeLorean time machine. His credits also include The Last Starfighter, Return of the Jedi, several of the original Star Trek films, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, so exciting about that, Jurassic Park, Fight Club, one of my all-time favorites, and so many other credits. We'd need a whole day just to go through them all. But today, Kevin, thank you for joining us to talk about Jaws during its 55th anniversary week. How are you doing today, my friend?
Hello. Hi, guys. It's nice to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, this is our honor. This is so great for us. We're so glad you are here. Before we begin, I'd love to know, is there anything coming up right now that you'd like to talk about, to promote before we jump into the Jaws stuff?
No, I'm good. Let's just take care of all the fandom. And, I'd love to tell stories about what I've done. And happy to talk to you about any questions that you have on any of the shows I've worked on.
Fantastic. Well, that's quite a few shows. You have quite a storied career. And again, this is an honor for us to have you here. So you grew up, from what I understand, in Connecticut, making 8mm films at a young age. Is that kind of where your filmmaking interests began?
Yeah, kind of. My parents happened to have an 8mm camera in their closet that I came across, and I said, well, I could make this work. You just need film. And we had a couple opportunities in our high school to do something creative, and we decided to do a couple of movies that you just throw together with your classmates, and we did that. I wasn't so much on the sports side. I was more on the creative side, I guess. I was audiovisual club, camera club. We used to take pictures of the sports teams, drama club, all 4 years of high school, did some acting in the one-act plays. That was rewarding. And that's where I started to get the idea about what I might want to do. But life's strange, and it plays strange tricks. And there I was in 74 in April, and I was bussing tables on Martha's Vineyard and waiting for divine intervention.
Can you tell us about that divine intervention? Because that's like a pretty cool story right there. How did you start in April 1974 working as that busboy? Can you tell us that story?
I got a job at a restaurant called the Harborside, Martha's Vineyard, down the end of Main Street, right on the wharf, by a referral from the bartender. They had already hired all the gal waitresses, and I ended up being the muscle boy, lifting all the platters and taking dirty dishes up to the galley upstairs. And one night during Easter weekend, a party of 6 came in, all guys, and they started to just have a real good time for themselves, almost like nobody else was in the restaurant but them, in a polite way, but very animated and talking their war stories. And I realized that this was about film, and kind of listened in a little bit. But when they left, the gentleman that was the production designer, Joseph Alves, who I know had left a valise underneath the table, and in it were the storyboards. And I rushed out with the valise, and I said, who left this? And he was so happy to remember that he had it. And he told me, he said, inside there is all the storyboards for a movie. And I said, are you guys going to make a movie? And he said, we sure are. And naturally, the next question is, what's it about? And he said, it's going to be about a shark that eats your whole island. And that was my first introduction to what Jaws was about. And I realized they'd come to Martha's Vineyard to make a movie. And I stayed in touch. And about 3-4 days later, I got hired as a laborer in the barn with the orca. And we went on to work almost 6 months on that show.
Now, did you work also with the shark? And you did some stuff with the shark as well. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Worked my way all the way up. The orca was the big deal at the time in the construction. And I ended up taking over all the paperwork and time cards and getting the money and petty cash, cut checks, things like that. We went on to build gazebos, and we did work at the Brody House. We had boardwalks and cabanas and snow fence and everything that Jaws was going to be. And then I ended up working with a painter named Ward Welton, who was just a fabulous man, taught me a lot of great stuff about how movies get made and about the people that work on them. And we painted all those things. And then sure enough, the sharks came into town, still in the molds, and they needed a bit of work still. They, wasn't going to be done overnight. And it took a lot of work to get them to go where they had to go. But we started painting the sharks and then working on the jaw and the rubber and the teeth and everything. I worked with a gentleman named Roy Arbogast, who I went on to work with quite a bit when I came back out to Hollywood. But we worked on making the sharks look as good as we could. And then we came to paint them. Ward taught me how to do the 2 different colors and the texture of the shark skin with chopped walnut and silica sand, and spent the whole time helping. Whatever they needed me to do is where I ended up working, but mostly on the sharks towards the end of the time when they had to be ready in time to get out there to shoot.
Now, I heard a lot of the teeth kind of went missing, or people would kind of take them out to the bars to show off to the ladies out there. Did you see any of that going on?
So every night we had a mold that had all different sizes of the teeth that we needed to use in the jaw. And every night we would make up elastomer, that was the rubber compound, and we'd pour up a set of teeth, clamp it together, and go home for the night. And the next day we'd take them apart and we'd start filling up the jaw, not only to make the sharks, but of course when they got used and the shooting, we knew that we kept having to refresh the amount of teeth that we had to replace in case they got damaged. But every morning we come in and a big tooth was missing. And it was like, Kevin, you forgot to fill the big tooth. No, I did. Well, you forgot to use the stick and get the air bubbles out because there's nothing there. No, I did that. And then so we did a test and we poured up a set and put it to bed. And the next day, sure enough, no big tooth. And so we realized that somebody had access to it that could get by the guard and go upstairs and grab a tooth. And sure enough, we found the culprit, and he would take a piece of leather and stab the tooth and put it around his neck and go off to the bar of choice and make small talk with someone and end up getting drinks on for himself by virtue of the tooth that he had as a value.
I've never heard that story. Luke, you were telling me that. That's fantastic. Can I ask you, besides the fact that some teeth were stolen, can you tell us about like how the teeth were functioning inside the shark? Like they were being broken, and was it just a function of the shark being in the water and everything it was going through? Why did you have to make a new set of teeth every day? When
the sharks came to Martha's Vineyard, they weren't complete. Some of the work on the jaw, the jowls, the back of the mouth, all the pieces that would hold the teeth hadn't been finished at that time. We were doing those details. So we had the jaws pieces and we had to put them in. And then somebody had numbered the jaw with different numbers for what teeth went where, and that bled into the material. So we had to grind that off, freshen that up, and then making the teeth, they're all different sizes, and putting them in where they had to go. In addition to when they were doing the filming, oftentimes the shark would ram into the boat or chew on the barrel or eat a guy or whatever the deal was when we finally got to shooting them. And we ended up having to make teeth all the time and making sure that we had sets that we could pop in, bring the shark back, put the heaters on them, dry out the moisture, all the water, and then add the new teeth to the broken shark, then take it back out, crane it up, put it on the rig, and then get it ready for the next day of shooting. It was constant repair because they were using it in a very serious way.
Sounds like a real shark, like going through its teeth.
Yeah, I know.
And that's what it did. And of course, later that became instrumental when we used that tooth on the boat where Ben Gardner's head comes through, where Hooper comes in with the flashlight trying to find what went on and sees a tooth and reaches for the tooth. So it had a little cameo of its own.
Now, speaking of that scene, they actually filmed that back here in California, and you were part of that. Like, and didn't you even kind of were one of the instrumental people of kind of, didn't you push his head through the hole, or can you tell us about that story?
I sure can. What happened was the film was pretty much done. Stephen and Verna Fields, the editor, actually had given an answer yes on the answer print, but Stephen had an idea in the back of his mind, and he called Joe Alves. And I was working at his house doing handyman projects for him at the time. He was very nice about keeping me busy to get through until the movies picked up again. And we got a call, and Stephen said he wanted to do a couple of pieces. One was where the shark would hit the boat and water would spray through the gunnels and into the boat to give it some kind of seriousness of what's lying ahead. And the other idea was he wanted to do a shot with Ben Gardner's head coming through the side of his boat with Hooper trying to look for what happened to him. And in that, he went to reach for a tooth that he saw in that hole in the boat. And when he did, he gets so shocked when the Ben Gardner body just wafts into the hole and scares him, and he drops the tooth, and he doesn't have the evidence. And now it's just his own story. So what we did was we used the boat hull that we made for using the spray of the water. We shot that in Joe Alves' driveway using sledgehammers and garden hoses. And then we went to Verna Fields' house and we used her pool for the underwater shot. I went around and got all the dive tanks and everything. I got the underwater housing from Panavision. I got everything together. We had the hull. We brought it down there. And we set it up with 2x4s all the way across the pool, and Del Armstrong, the makeup artist, came with the head, and we put it on a dummy and clothed the dummy, and we started doing the shots. And it was, everybody's at one end of the pool underwater. We put a little milk in there for color, and I just got in. I didn't have a breathing tank, so I just held my breath and ducked in the water, and I'd rock the boat with my back with the two bys across it, and I'd watch for the flashlight. And there was one moment when it was bright enough, and that's where my cue was to push the head through, and I kind of wafted with my arm inside the shirt on the shoulders in the back. And they kept shooting. We kept doing them. I think he shot 31 takes, and then we ended up printing number 29. And when I came back the next day to return everything, he was very nice about it, brought me into Verna's room with her moviola, which is what we used back then. And she goes, "Here it is. Look at this. Look how it cuts together." And it was like, oh my gosh, this is the scariest moment that, it's just going to drive him crazy. And sure enough, when I finally got to go see it in Chinese theater, they were jumping off the seats at that one beat. And I was pretty happy that I had, the opportunity to work on it.
That scene, I tell you what, that one scene still holds up today as one of the scariest scenes. We had a friend in his 30s, had never seen Jaws, and so we were like, "You are going to watch it this week." And so we were watching it, and that scene just made him jump off the couch. It's so well done. It's crazy to think that that was done way after the film was done. You guys a swimming pool to do that. That looked so great. Wow, what an accomplishment.
We liked it. Everybody was happy with it. And it was a secret at the time. It was like under the table. We can't talk about it. Stephen already said yes to the print. Next thing you know, Verna's cutting something in it. It was all cool. And I think I had fun about the fact that it was a secret. And I really couldn't say much about it at that time. But of course now it's open season.
Well, you say that there's people who have not seen that scene. I always love watching the Jaws for the first time with someone who's not seen it before, because and Luke even had a camera out just to film the reaction of the person as they were jumping off the couch. That was a lot of fun.
I tend to do that. I tend to film the reactions of people watching it for the first time. Like my sister's kids, they'll jump, but we were surprised to see our friend, who's a grown man, jumping up and almost like hiding behind the couch because of some of the jump scares in the movie. And also with the milk thing you were talking about, wasn't it Carl Gottlieb who went out and grabbed the milk that you guys ended up sprinkling in the pool to kind of make it more cloudy?
I can attest to that. I really don't remember seeing him and being there. I know that Rex Metz was the underwater photographer, and he might have had that in the back of his mind to do that. But Carl Gottlieb was obviously very involved in all parts of the movie, and he probably could have been there, and I was caught up in everything that I had to do, and I missed our opportunity. But it's a good technique that's often used to help notice more of the water, and they do it quite often. At least they did back then.
Yeah. So you were like officially the puppeteer of Ben Gardner.
That is correct.
So Kevin,
the funny thing is I was the only guy that didn't have a dive tank, and so they'd say, "Okay, here we go again," and they'd mark it somehow, and everybody'd go down there, and I'd hold my breath. And fortunately, the shot wasn't all that long. But you're right when you say it still stands up to this day. I remember when I went to the Chinese theater to see Jaws, those people were scared out of their wits. When they do the scene where the wharf gets pulled away and the guy's trying to paddle with his feet to get back up and get saved and not get bit by the shark that's supposed to be coming, the lady next to me was literally pushing her feet on the floor, trying to get away from a shark that was coming after her. And she's grabbing my arm as hard as she can. She says, "Please tell me they don't come up on land. Please tell me they don't come up on land." As if, I knew everything about it. It was funny.
Oh my gosh. So one question I'd love to ask is a set like Jaws it's kind of iconic and storied, like so much has been written about it, and we know a lot about the set, we think. But you were there, you were interacting daily with Joe Alves, Steven Spielberg, all the storied people from the set. Can you describe a little bit what it was like? Like, who is it that you interacted with, and what was that like on a daily basis?
There was 3 people that I worked under. And the first one was Jimmy Woods, who was the construction coordinator. And he was responsible at that time for the boat construction and all those set pieces that I mentioned. And there'd be times when we had to go to the set. We had to put breakaway glass in for that final scene, and or change some parts out, or make sure more barrels. Or there was, some interaction at times where they'd grab me, throw me on the truck with what we needed, and we'd head out there. Mord Welton was a fabulous teacher. And stuff at the Brody house that we did wood graining on the doors. We did marble and trompe l'oeil on the countertops and things like that. And he taught me techniques that most people don't learn when they come out to Hollywood for several years. We painted the cabanas and we did the boardwalks, and he taught me how to age the snow fence and things like that. And the third man was Roy Arbogast, when I worked with him on the sharks, on the skin of the sharks and on the jaws and everything about it. And then the other fellas came in, the other effects crew, worked on the hydraulics, worked on the electronics, the pneumatics to make everything work. So I was, an integral part of it, being this young kid, 22 years old, making $3.50 an hour. They had 400 extras on the beach, and they had 4 outhouses, and they were pretty messy, and they didn't have anybody to clean them. And they said, "Kev, will you do that?" And I said, "Get the water truck." I hosed it all down, cleaned it all up best I could, put in new toilet paper, and somebody took a picture of me cleaning the outhouse. And I have that picture on my wall because I started on the bottom, and nobody can take that away from me. And after 45 years, I often look at that picture and I go, I remember you back then. You just wanted to learn everything as fast as you could. And that was really the enjoyable process for me, because it was like a carnival. It was like Pinocchio. It was like, oh my God, you know, they're on the beach with Camera and Dolly and all this other stuff. It was really, really great. And we had to, the first time they were doing the scene with the crabs on the arm where Brody and Hendrix come across a piece of the body. And Ward had told me to get some Hudson sprayer with dry color in it. And we're going to go see the company for the first time. And it was 180 degrees from where it was the night before, when we had just set up the set and made it hot on the beach. And don't walk on the track, and don't walk on the sand, and so all of a sudden they say, Kev, bring the Hudson out. And they were out there shooting, and Vernon was right there. Steven was sitting in the chair. They had a 9 light. They were getting everything ready. And Joe wanted me to add some more aging behind Brody's head, Roy Scheider. And so I'm doing that, but I'm just sucking in everything I'm looking at. Man, this is what's going on. I get this. I understand where everybody. And so then it was, okay, Kev, thanks. And I said Joe, and then Ward said, thanks, Kevin. And then Steven said, thanks, Kevin. And then it went around the whole company as some kind of riddle or joke. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Kevin. And there it was, the first setup, and everybody knew my name. So I was kind of like a go-to guy when you go to the boathouse. You know, just go see Kevin. He'll get you whatever. And, you know, it's just a kid learning. And I got to be involved in a lot of pieces. I'll tell you that.
Does the enormity of having your first experience be on Jaws, does that actually hit you? I mean, do you? So sometimes you think people that have something so great like that, they don't realize how great of an experience that is. Does it hit you like how monumental that is? For the rest of us, we're listening to your stories. We're like, wow, it's fantastic.
For me, at that time, it was $3.50 an hour. When I was working at the restaurant, I wasn't making $3.50 a day, you know, because it was very quiet. The vineyard hadn't even opened up yet. Memorial Day hadn't come, and there wasn't a lot of people coming to the restaurant. So I really had very little. When I started on a Thursday, and then we worked 10 hours, and we got overtime after 8. And then on Saturday, we got time and a half. And then on Sunday, we had some rain coming, and they were concerned about the production office roof. Who wants to come in and help put the tarp up on the roof of the production office? Okay. And then they paid Monday to Sunday. So in that first week check, I got Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It doubled time and a half, and overtime on the 2 days. And I remember that following Thursday, Jimmy Woods came in and said, payroll, and he started passing out the checks. And I was loading stuff up on this 20-foot stake bed. And he goes, here's your check. And I go, thank you. And I opened it up right away. And it was for $372, you know, not $3.72. And I looked at that check for a good minute. And I kept looking as if the numbers were going to disappear. And I said, $372. I go, and I remember saying it, I said, this is the business for me. And, you know, in the beginning, when you first get involved, you don't recognize the luck and the lightning and the magic moment and everything that went into that. How were you there in Martha's Vineyard at that time? And the guy left the valise and and it happens all the way through your career. 45 years later, I can look back and say, I remember how I got that show. I went over to the grocery store, Last Starfighter, and I wanted something to drink for the evening. And I was looking at a bottle of wine, and the art director who we just finished working with together on Steven's Twilight Zone episode called Kick the Can said he was starting up with a project over at Lorimar called The Last Starfighter, and then said, why don't you call Edward Denault, who was the vice president, and put your name in and see what can happen. And sure enough, I got that. And so it's up and down. It wasn't all wins. I mean, you had some dry times and times you're off for quite a while until the business changed. You had writers' strikes and actors' strikes and shutdowns from time to time, but you know what? Just keep at it, and that pendulum will swing back. And next thing you know, you'll be back on top again for a while.
Yeah.
Now, being on set that much, did you end up keeping any of the props or the teeth or any of the, like, even just, scripts or call sheets or any stuff like that?
Well, in my basement, I have a complete 26-foot shark, and I have the sign from Close Encounters, and then I have 3 DeLoreans, and then I have the 26-foot Scout Walker from Jedi. Not really.
Okay.
I was just saying that.
But do you have anything from the set or anything that you were able to keep?
No, I mean, your job wasn't to keep things. Your job was to make things and let them take pictures of it, right? And, there's always a big secret. Don't take pictures of anything. We didn't have cameras that you could just shoot everything right away. There's rare. I get asked all the time, what do you got? I got a couple things here, a couple things there. I was a friend of a photographer named Andy Caulfield, and he came out to Hollywood and we stayed in friendship. And so he had a couple of pictures left over of the one with me cleaning the outhouses and the tail of a shark that was in a couple of pictures of the orca and things like that. And I ended up with a couple of those from him, but not a lot. I mean, I don't have any teeth. I don't have any shark molds or any of that stuff. I don't have any barrels or just wasn't in my character to take things or did I have a place to do that? I've got a couple of artist renderings that Joe saw that I got from Close Encounters on the sign, which I worked on a lot. But I don't have, if I had all the props that I needed to make a DeLorean time machine from when we first built them, I would have made a complete set for myself because it'd be worth $1 million to all the fans that are still making replicas from what we did on Back to the Future.
Oh, yeah.
Can I ask you a question? You have, and we're going to talk a little bit more about, continue back on Jaws 2 in just a second, but you have now transitioned into, you're a script writing coach. And so you're a specialist in how scripts are. I just would love to know from your expertise today, how would you rate the Jaws script? I mean, it's by the great Carl Gottlieb as a co-writer. We don't want to disparage any of that, but like, how does it stand up to the great scripts that you've seen through the years? And why has it stood through the years?
There's no doubt that the story structure of Jaws works out so well. You've got all the problems in the beginning. It's got this great middle when they decide to get on the boat and go out and shark hunt. And you've got this dramatic finish of everything. It's wonderfully structured. That and the fact that it had this fright element to it of can't go in the water anymore because you could get bitten by a shark. It stands on its own. And I've read other scripts by Carl. They're just fabulous work. He's a very talented individual. And I respect him for the Jaws stuff. He's a friend of mine. And I also respect him for the other scripts that he's allowed me to read. And they're all just fabulous. What I did when I came through the special effects route, I tried to learn that craft as well as I could. And I had some opportunities to work on some respectable shows, a lot of TV at Universal with some great masters, and then some smaller features. And then I finally got to do some on my own, Baptism by Fire. I learned a lot, what I didn't know. And I just kept going up the ropes. And sometimes I'd go back to work with Roy Arbogast again when we went back to do Revenge of the Jedi. And then, I'd go forward and do a unit on my own when Steven wanted me to do Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom. I did the American unit on that and back and forth. And then you learn. Of course, you get the script so you can see the actors emote and see the camera setups and things like that. I took a lot of the classes that you could in this town, and I was fortunate to make use of that. And one of the ones that I did was writing. And Sid Fields and Bob McKee and John Truby and Richie Walters and Ron Bass and all this bit of business that I learned, along with other parts of filmmaking. I got in the Directors Guild, or directing commercials, second unit television, things like that. And then there was a time when it got kind of lean. And I realized that the special effects guys weren't getting the best deal they could. And I thought that I would try to be an agent for them, because I usually made a pretty decent deal for myself. I was pretty clever about it. So I went into that, and then I went through all the crafts from the DPs and sound and wardrobe, makeup, hair. I had them all. I had 41 clients. I had 6 people in my office helping me. And I realized that one of the focuses was the writers. Nothing starts without a script. Nothing starts without a good script. And I would go to Pitch Fest, and I would listen to people tell me their story, and I'd like it, and then I'd read the script, and it wasn't there. It didn't have the structure, didn't have all the basic elements. And I had learned by reading all these scripts that were submitted to me about really what makes a good script. And then trying to get scripts set up at the studios in different productions, and why they got rejected and what was about them. And when we walk away from a pitch meeting, in the beginning, I would go with the writers and listen to how they did. And so I could coach them when things didn't happen. And then I realized that I'm waiting too long for the writers to come back with a script that's proper and valuable enough that I could then take it to a studio and felt good about it. And so I said, heck with this. I'm just going to help people write. I'm going to teach them a story structure. I start with the title. I go to the log line, synopsis, story structure, step outlines, formatting, everything about it, all the way to the end. And I work with them for as long as it takes to get it finished. And they're always so happy, because we had this relationship for maybe as long as 3 months. I've got one I've been working on for about a year. It's extremely complicated, but it's high concept. And the writers seem to be extremely happy when we get through with it, and they realize what they've learned. And there comes to be a point when, teacher student, they're getting it now. And now I know that they could write any script they want to, because what I've taught them, they kind of figured it out now, and they know what they have to do.
And one last Jaws question. What was kind of the biggest lesson or takeaway you got from working on that film earlier in your career?
I learned several lessons on Jaws. I learned how many people it takes to make a movie, and you can learn something from every one. And you should always engage and be nice to people and develop a rapport, and because they're all valuable, and you never know where you're going to go and what's going to happen next. And some guy that maybe you didn't like him so much, but you're on the next show with him and you have to work with him again. So always be nice to people. Learn everything you can. I remember I was working with Jimmy Woods, the construction coordinator, and we were putting on the bridge of the boat. We were kind of dressing it up or nailing it down, or we were right up on top of the orca. And I said to him, I'd like to have a part in the movie. And he said, you have one. And that sunk in. Do your job. Do it well. Be nice to people. Learn everything you can. And you never know where it's going to end up. I got 45 years and quite a satchel of interesting projects I've worked on.
Oh, yeah. The advice you just gave, I received that advice from some wise people. You're like, what is the best piece of career advice you can get? Is be nice. People like working with nice people. And plus, it's leading into our next question here. In Hollywood, relationships are so important, and because you work with this group of people, you grow together, you work on projects together. Can you talk a little bit about how Jaws itself and the relationships there and catapulted you into your future projects, and how those relationships and maintaining good relationships with people, how important that was?
The wonderful thing about Jaws is everybody that worked on Jaws, because it was so successful, and it was the first movie to break through the ceiling and make over $100 million. It passed Exorcist and Sound of Music, Gone with the Wind, all the big hitters. And so everybody that worked on that movie became much more successful when they went on to their next job or next project, because it was kind of like, well, I just finished Jaws, and you couldn't get hurt by it. I was just a kid, so I had to come out to Hollywood. I had to wait for the union to get exhausted so that I could come on to a studio, in my case, Paramount, and ended up becoming a permit and earning my days in a continuous fashion so that I could then qualify to apply for a union membership. And I ended up at Paramount, and I'm working with the same guys from Jaws, because guess what? In that story, that Hemingway story, it was about sharks. And we were making hammerhead sharks, 13-foot hammerhead sharks. And we made a 26-foot sailfish that they had to use. And I'm working with Roy Arbogast and Richie Helmer and Mike Wood and Cal Acord and all the people that I'd worked with on Jaws. And I was good with them because I remembered all the rules. Learn what you can and be nice to people. And here we are doing it again. Roll up my sleeves. I'm making sharks just like I've been doing it for 20 years. And, you know, some of the old timers were watching me and say, hey, who's this young buck? Where did he come from? How does he know? And so I slowly advanced by learning at the studios and helping people on TV shows. Universal was very busy. We had $6 Million Man and Bionic Woman and Emergency and Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. And there was stuff on every stage. So there was so much work for us. You could just keep hopping around to wherever they assigned you, or working in the prop shop and still making a decent living and learning the craft, building breakaways and, you know, metal work, carpentry. Times when I had to do prop making, learning how to build the sets, nights at Universal to make a living, and just try to learn everything I could. And it's been a pretty decent career.
Mm-hmm. And to tag onto that, I know that Jaws it's its 45th anniversary, and it's one of the most influential films that has ever come out of Hollywood. But if we could jump just for a couple of questions onto Jaws 2, and then we will finish up with a couple of other questions. Luke, I know that you had some questions that you wanted to ask from the set of Jaws 2.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, what were the differences on working on Jaws 2 versus the first film? Like, differences as in, like, just the experience, or the differences in even just the shark?
So one day in March, I think it was '87, Joe Alves came through the shop, and he was heading down to prefab, and they had started building the sharks, and he said, everything's a go, and we'd love to have you on board. And I said, I'd be happy to help you again. And I went down and worked with Bob Matty, who was the supervisor on it. And I was pretty much an assistant for him in the office as far as, again, doing all the time cards, doing all the petty cash, getting the cut checks, buying all the equipment that they needed, shopping for nut, bolt, and screw, welders, rentals on compressors, all the gear that they needed. He had a big crew. And the attitude was very positive. Nobody ever thought, we have to go build another shark, or here we go again. No, it wasn't. It was like, wait. We can do this now, and the studio knows what we can do when they give us the time to do it well. It was never that the shark was not working. It was always that the shark was not working yet. And you have to give credit to Bob and Joe and to Steven, because they wanted it to work so badly. And now you're on 2, and you realize, kind of like a do-over, you can build a better looking shark, the better mechanics, a better system. You're familiar with the onslaught of what the ocean can do. And it was like, let's do another good show. And it was a long location. We were 10 and a half months in Pensacola, Florida, which is not a bad place to be, by the way. And they did a couple of little pieces up in Martha's Vineyard again, just for establishment. But that was pretty ambitious. We had all the teenagers. We had all the boats colliding into each other. We had the ski around the water. We had the lady that gets blown up in the boat. It was really dynamic, very involved. And we had a good time, too. I mean, it was nice to be back and diving all the time and sunshine, and pretty fun place to be.
We really love Jaws. We love Jaws. I love Jaws too, and those are just fantastic films. Thank you for working on those. We're down to our last, probably less than 10 minutes here left in the interview. So I know that Luke wanted to ask you a few questions, if it was all right, about Back to the Future. All right, Luke.
Yeah, wow. We probably need a whole nother show just for that. But just since we don't have a lot of time, just tell us, like, I was listening to something that you were on recently where you're talking about that you kind of took a risk, and you're like, I only want to work on the film if I get to focus on the car. Can you tell us that story?
Well, it wasn't as bold as that, but inside my heart it was.
Yeah.
I got an opportunity to go to Amblin and meet with Bob Z and Bob G. I met Larry Paul, the production designer. I had already weaseled a script out of the production office, and I had recognized that the car was a big piece of the film as far as the special effects had to go. I had worked on a show called Last Starfighter, and in that show, there's a star car that Robert Preston drives, and I didn't build the car. They had it sent out to an outside fellow by the name of Gene Winfield, who's a wonderful custom car builder. But I had to babysit it on the set, and it didn't have some of the things that they hoped it would have had. I mean, Gene did a great job, but they wanted lights in the interior. This wasn't there. They wanted smoke to come out. That wasn't there. And so they had all the specific things that I felt bad that I couldn't supply because we weren't involved from the beginning on it. So when it came to do Back to the Future, the car was the big deal. It wasn't so big on the effects side of things because that all came later as they wrote into the beginning of the show. But the car was the star, and I knew that I wanted to be a part of it, not for any egotistical reason, but other than to know that if something went wrong, I knew how it was built and how to fix it or whatever that was. And I said to him, I said, I'd like to do the show, but I'd also want to be responsible for building the car. And they hadn't figured that out, but that normally is a custom prop that comes under our auspices. And so they just ran up the flagpole, and Steven was comfortable. And they said, look, you have to take it off the set. You have to take it off the studio. You have to find your own place to build it so nobody can take pictures of it because he's really security conscious about getting it out there before it's time. And I said, deal. And they said, we're going to have some people, art department, to help you liaison between the sketches that you got from Andy Probert and Ron Cobb, who I'd worked with both on other shows. And Mike Chaffee came on board, and he was instrumental in some of the artistic input and design. And we had a crew, about 20 men, that said, okay, fine, we do this. Some were parts that we got out of a surplus. Others were stuff that we had to build, the flux bands and the neon and the junction boxes and all the interior. I mean, busy. Bob Gale kept coming along and say, okay, homemade, we want to see the welds, we want to see the screws and the connections and all that stuff. And then there's a lot of story points, right? It needs a plutonium machine, and it needs a flux capacitor, a Mr. Fusion, a hook mode. It had all these stories to tell, and it needs a big battery terminals cleaner that Michael can hit with his elbow and make it come on and that kind of thing. So it was a wonderful project. And I'm glad that I kind of felt that intuition to say, hey, the car's going to be a big part. And now there's about 150, 160 replicas built around the world, and the fans keep calling. And I'm proud to say that I had an opportunity to work on Back to the Future and was a big part of that beautiful car.
Now, speaking of the car, with all your years of experience now, like if you got a chance to go back and remake the DeLorean, would you do anything differently, or would you just keep it just as it was?
One of the deals when we did Jaws 2, we got a chance to do the sharks again, and we knew everything that we could do to make them better. And they were better. They were better than the ones that we made on Jaws. And you look at them, they look better. If we were to go back and do Back to the Future again, that car would be everything that it is. I don't know what you'd make other than it'd be slightly different in its design. It had all the features to tell the story, and obviously it looked great because it was built on the DeLorean, which we were fortunate to get, and it looked like a spaceship, and it had all the bells and whistles on it. So I don't know what we would do over. It might look different, but when you hit a home run like the car does, that's good enough right there.
What was it like working with the two Bobs on the set?
On the set, working with Bob Zemeckis is always challenging. He's a wonderful guy. He's awfully bright. He's got great comedic sense about everything. Oh, it'd be funny if we turn this on its head. That would be funny. And okay. And he has that sense of timing when he does those things. But he really wanted to make a hit with Back to the Future, and Bob Gale and him worked on it a long time. And Bob Gale was really good about adding new pieces. We got colored pages every day for the first part of the show that Bob Gale was really putting all this story together so well that him and Bob had created But Bob Z wanted everything to work, and he wanted it now, and it had to be good. And it was a real heavy load on everybody. And of course, you know that they started over when Michael J. Fox became available, and that was a big deal. So there's a lot of things that Bob kind of augmented and made a little different when he had Michael involved, and it made for better scenes and better pieces. Both of them are great guys. They're bright. I'm still friends with them, and I highly respect them for their sharpness. Bob's serendipity. He'd come up with something right on a moment, and we try to figure out how fast we could get it to him and make it work. It was a very enjoyable experience, but it was really industrious. It was really difficult to fit everything that we had to do in that shooting schedule.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. It has been such an honor and such a joy to speak with you. Talking with somebody who has so much history with the industry and is still very active is quite an honor for us. So thank you so much, Kevin, for coming on the show with us today. We hope
to talk anytime you want.
All right.
I'm still here.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for being with us today on the show. This has been such a joy to hear about your experiences on Jaws 1, Jaws 2, and Back to the Future. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in today. We are just so excited to be celebrating the 45th anniversary of Jaws, and you can just follow us here on The Con Guy Show, here on that #show.com. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys soon.
Thanks a lot, guys. Nice working with you.
Thank you so much, Kevin.